It is Priya Khatri, where she is in Robert Adams Middle School in 7th grade. She enjoys reading, science, and skiing. It is my pleasure to invite Priya Khatri onto the stage.
Awesome. You want to put those things there?
Hi, my name is Priya Khatri, and the information that Samira gave you was accurate. Today I will be giving a speech on polar bears. Before I begin, can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Today I will be going over general facts about polar bears, the evolution of polar bears, and threats that polar bears face. One last question before I begin. What do you call a polar bear caught in the rain? Any guesses?
Red bear.
No.
Grizzly bear.
A grizzly bear.
Grizzly, not grizzly.
On to my first point. General facts about polar bears. Polar bears live in the Arctic, so they never meet with penguins who live in Antarctica. North-south, complete opposites. But if you do give a penguin to them on a platter, they will eat it. Polar bears are often called the largest terrestrial carnivores, but you could argue. First of all, a polar bear relies on marine ecosystems, so you could say they're not terrestrial. And in the marine world, they're beat in size by orcas and blue whales. Lastly, there's the carnivore thing. Polar bears rely off the thick fat layer of seals to make a living. That's what makes polar bears possible. So you could say that the word lipivore, meaning fat eater, fits better than carnivore, meaning meat eater. On to my second point, the evolution of polar bears. Well, I've got a cool way to explain this one. So, once upon a time, in the Arctic, there were grizzly bears. The grizzly bears, but then one grizzly bear would give birth to a bear that had a gene that made it white. It also had paws that were better made for gripping on ice. So this polar bear could survive easier in the cold climate. So, this polar bear would pass on its white gene to some of its polar bear offspring. So the grizzly bears would have a harder time of surviving, and the polar bears would have an easier time of surviving. So the grizzly bears go bye-bye. And then polar bears are living in the Arctic. But it might not stay that way, which leads to my third and final point. What are some threats that polar bears face? Well, polar bears face many threats. One being oil exploration. As oil exploration moves to the north, it has many devastating effects on polar bears. One is that if a polar bear were to eat an animal that's contaminated by the oil, it would die. There are also many other ways in which polar bears can ingest the oil, and these include if their fur has the oil and then they're trying to clean it, or if they're trying to get water and the polar bear and the water has oil in it. Another threat that polar bears face is global warming. Because of global warming, the ice in the North Pole is melting faster and faster. Now, polar bears rely on the sea ice to hunt and store energy. And when the sea ice melts naturally, they spend that time fasting. So, if the sea ice is pretty much melted all year, then the polar bears will spend the entire year fasting. And obviously that's not good. So as polar bears stay on fast longer and longer because the sea ice melts, their cubs have worse health. So the cubs will die off easier, and that will lead to local extinctions. And if a local extinction happens everywhere, that's obviously a real extinction. The final threat that polar bears face doesn't happen very much, but it still does. The last threat is that polar bears are sometimes shot and killed for their heavy fur coats and other things. Now, polar bears are well protected in the areas that they live, but some people do manage to get around these defenses. Today I talked about polar bears. More specifically, I talked about general facts about polar bears, the evolution of polar bears, and threats that polar bears face. Now, when I was talking about the threats, obviously this can cause an extinction, but together we can keep these animals alive, which is why I chose this topic. I want you all to go home and think about what you can do to help save polar bears. Thank you for listening.
Oh, good job.